In this video, I'm going through the 10 main steps you can take as a creator, a coach, or anyone who sells their skills or expertise online to build a simple, solo, and robust online business that can make 6 figures and up, working just 2 to 3 days a week, all without needing sales calls, ads, or a big audience, aka to become something I call a high agency creator. These are all the systems and strategies that I've been learning over the last couple of years since my last business died, and each one is kind of useful in and of itself if you're looking to install more efficiency in your business. So whether you implement one or all of these, I hope you'll find some value from this video. And with that said, let's dive into step 1. Craft or refine your freedom offer. If we were working together, we'd start by defining one main offer, one primary transformation that you deliver for clients. This is what I call your freedom offer, and we pick one because it keeps things nice and simple. So we define this one core offer, this one core transformation that you deliver for clients, and then we make sure it has 6 core components of successful offers, which I call the 6 Ps: promise, path, pricing, protection, perks, and push. As an aside, if you want to make sure your offer has these 6 Ps, you want to make sure it has everything it needs to perform, check out the link in the description. It takes you to something called the 10-minute offer unlock, which is a simple tool I put together that gives you a visual depiction of the strength of your current offer, lets you see if there are any hidden gaps or opportunities that could improve it. So I recommend checking that out. It's totally free, takes 10 minutes or less, and I think it will help. So anyway, once we had defined your freedom offer and made sure it had these 6 Ps, we'd move on to step 2. Create your offer ladder. So there are 3 ways to make more money in any client business. You can get more clients, get those clients to pay you more, and get those clients to stay for longer. An offer ladder is the mechanism we can use to do all 3 at once. It's also one of the mechanisms that we use to add the leverage into our business that lets you make really good money without having to sacrifice all of your time for it. So the idea is that you take your freedom offer and then you sell different dynamic levels or rungs of support. At those lower rungs, you're offering less support for a lower fee. And then at those higher rungs, people who want faster results can pay more to get more direct access or input from you. And running things like this does 2 main things. It maximizes acquisition because you've lowered that now number and made it easier for people to join. But you also maximize revenue by tapping into the corners of any market who are willing to pay you exponentially more for faster results. But the coolest part of offer ladders for me is that it does all of that while keeping your delivery burden nice and low. Like, because those lower rungs are cheaper, that's where you're going to have the majority of your clients, but that's also where your input is lowest. So even though there are lots of people at those levels, it doesn't necessarily mean you're having to do that much work to serve them. Whereas at those higher rungs, where your level of input is much higher too, you're going to have far fewer people because they're more expensive. And you can also decide how many clients you are willing to accept at any level. So you can look at your calendar and how much money you want to make and determine how many people you're willing to work with in a way that hits your financial goals without having to spend all of your time on client delivery. Finally, offer ladders also help to reduce churn, because clients at those higher rungs can simply drop down to a lower one instead of leaving altogether. And it also helps to resolve the tension that is common in this space between using your time to serve your current clients versus finding new ones. Because suddenly your revenue doesn't hinge on acquisition, it doesn't hinge on getting new people into the business. Instead, you can focus on your current clients and upsell them into those higher levels of your offer. You're less reliant on those new clients, which means you can dedicate more time to your current ones, which keeps the quality of your service nice and high, which also helps to reduce churn and maximize LTV. So yeah, there are all sorts of benefits when it comes to offer ladders. If you want to learn more about them, I made a full video on the topic, so I'll link to that somewhere on the screen. But next, I want to go to step 3 and back to the offer itself. Sell the transition. So the freedom offer I talked about in step 1, it's a long-term client program that's kind of running in the background at all times. However, the problem with having one big long-term transformation like that is that it can often be too big for people to buy into. So in general, which is just kind of common sense, I guess, low commitment things are going to be easier to sell. And so unless you already have stacks of authority and proof and a substantial audience who knows, likes and trusts you, it's going to be much harder to sell a big transformation to people. So this is why when it comes to kind of formulating a freedom offer, we sell the transition instead of the transformation. The transition is basically a stepping stone, like a key stepping stone on the way to the final transformation. It's a much smaller commitment that is easier to say yes to. It's easier for you to deliver on. And so it builds someone's confidence in the process as well as their trust in your ability to help them. And then it opens the door to a conversation around what's next, which is where you can introduce the kind of next stage of the overarching transformation. From there, we move on to step 4, which is to package everything in a Google Doc. Most people in this kind of info space, they sell via sales calls. Sales calls work, they're effective, but they're not very efficient because you can spend an entire hour on a sales call with one person who may or may not accept the offer you make to them at the end of it. Whereas if you've packaged everything into a Google Doc, suddenly you can sell by chat instead. So that way, instead of spending an hour on a call with one person, you can be making offers to many people at the same time via email and DM. And it also means that you can automate the process of making offers. So for example, when someone downloads a lead magnet, you can redirect them automatically to your Google Doc, or they can click a link in an email and again be redirected to your Google Doc. So overall, you just end up with a much more efficient way to make offers. So at this point, we get to step 5, which is to create clients by creating customers first. As it happens, the quickest route to getting a client isn't always the shortest. So most people in this space, they get their leads and then they try and sell them straight into their client program. With enough time and leads, a small percentage of people buy it. It's normally about 2 to 3%. But for the vast majority of potential clients, it feels too risky. The implication is that you end up with a really inefficient audience, which means you need a really big audience. You need lots of leads to hit your financial goals. So the more efficient option, which is what we do as high agency creators, is to sell low ticket products first that are highly congruent with our client program. In other words, we try and turn people into a customer before we turn them into a client. So when you do this, you generate cash flow and you end up with a much more efficient audience because you're monetizing new segments of it. But you also get a really clear signal that these people might be willing to invest more money with you in the future. So it's a bit like looking at your audience and having a spotlight that picks out all the people in it who are likely or most likely to become a client. So next we turn to step 6, which gives us a really nice and efficient way to create those low ticket products in the first place. Serve clients to create customers. So for me, this is one of the most elegant and effective systems in this whole process. The basic idea is to create something for your clients, such as a workshop or a course, and then sell tickets to your audience. So that way you can create these customers from work you're already going to do. But then once they're in, once they've bought, you then have an opportunity to invite them to become clients. So essentially, you're letting people try before they buy. These people may not feel ready to become clients just yet, but it doesn't mean they don't have problems that they're willing to pay to solve. By selling these tickets, you give them a chance to solve those problems, but in the process, you show them what it's like to work with you and you introduce them to your other stuff. So this builds trust, it builds rapport, and it naturally opens the door to them wanting more. So when you come to make them an offer, it's significantly more appealing. But before you can create those customers, you need leads. And so that's what we're going to talk about next in step 7, post straight line content. Another thing that you see a lot in this space is people posting content to try and grow their audience and generate leads without any sort of framework to guide that process. And so what ends up happening when you don't have any sort of framework in place, or at least what's really easy to do, is to kind of scatter your efforts all over the place. You can end up posting on lots of different topics. There's very little cohesiveness in your messaging. You might only post when you feel inspired, which creates big gaps between posts. And the basic outcome of that is that not a lot can happen. You can pour lots of time and effort into the content creation process, but you don't get much from it. You don't get the results that you want. And it's really easy for that to lead to frustration and just to feel like the whole thing is a pointless endeavor and a waste of time. So that's why I'm a big fan of having a content framework of some sort. And the one that I came up with is called straight line content. So the kind of tagline for straight line content is that it draws the straightest possible line to results. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it here because I just made a full video that I'll link to somewhere on the screen. But the basic idea is that you create one primary post a day that fits into one or more of 3 core content buckets: philosophy, issues, and evidence. And you make sure that post has a clear link to an offer or idea that you're promoting. At that point, you then shred it and distribute it really efficiently around social media. So you end up with a really efficient process for creating and distributing content, but also for creating the type of content that delivers meaningful business results efficiently as well. And one part of that is doing something I call posting insights versus instructions, which takes us to step 8. So the idea here is that if I tell you exactly how to solve your problem, you may like me, it may build goodwill, but there's very little incentive to pay me because you're just going to go and take that information and then try it out for yourself. That situation changes if I demonstrate that I have the answers that you need without giving them away. That's what it means to post an insight versus an instruction. And it's particularly powerful if in the process I can change your perspective on the issue, because suddenly you then associate that change in perspective with me, which then raises my status in your mind at an implicit level. And that status component, that authority component, is crucial when it comes to making a sale. I think there's a time and a place for both, to share insights and instructions, but most creators focus on the latter. They give away all their best stuff and then leave very little incentive for people to buy from them. So that's why I encourage people to share the what and the why, and therefore create the intrigue and the demand that makes people lean in and be willing to hand over their money to get the how. Share the insights, sell the instructions, not the other way around. You stand to generate more leads and sales and build more authority in your space. From there, we move on to step 9, which is to take them from social onto email. To build a robust online business online, you really have to own your audience. Like, my last business died primarily because I didn't. And it's why I'm so focused now on building my email list. It's the only way to own your audience. It can't be taken away from you, but it also means you're no longer at the mercy of the algorithms. You have direct access to your audience basically 24/7. And not only that, email is also a much more natural environment for making offers compared to social media. And so for all of those reasons, I really encourage people to go email first. And the idea eventually is to basically run everything bar the delivery side of this business via email. You can just create that primary post I mentioned earlier as an email and distribute it really efficiently around social media, making offers daily, but that is something for another time. In the meantime, let's move on to step 10, which is letting people into our world. If you have an audience of people who knows, likes, and trusts you, you're always going to be able to put food on the table. This is basically my hedge against AI, but in order to do it, you have to let people into your world. Like, information these days is not enough. So that's why in our content, we're not just sharing information. We're really trying to let people get to know us. We're sharing our perspectives on life and work, especially the uncommon ones, the ones that differ from the way other people tend to do things. We also introduce people to the characters in our life, the key people in our lives. We're also coming up with big ideas that help us stand out. These big ideas are unique systems and mechanisms that produce the transformation that we deliver for people and that nobody else has. And as a result, people can't just go to AI to get these results. They have to come to us to understand what these ideas and systems and mechanisms involve. So for me, for example, this would be things like offer ladders and straight line content. We also define an aspirational personal identity to kind of represent who someone can become if they work with us. Again, so in my case, for example, that would be a high agency creator. So over time, by letting people into your world, these different elements come together to inform your personal brand and develop the all important trust and authority that comes with it. So that is everything for this one. Those are the 10 steps that you can take to build a simple, solo, and robust online business that makes six figures and up working just a few days a week. I hope it's been somewhat useful. I hope it's given you some food for thought on things you could do in your business to run things more efficiently. If you'd like any help implementing any of this stuff, feel free to reach out at any point and I'll try my best to help. In the meantime, don't forget to check out the link in the description. It takes you to the 10-minute offer unlock that I talked about earlier. And finally, if you want to learn all about an essential but often overlooked way to boost sales, check out this video next where I walk you through something called the push. Thanks so much for watching this one though. Hit subscribe if you got any value from it, and I will see you in the next one.